All right. Hello. Happy post-Thanksgiving. Happy holidays, I guess is um the appropriate phrase on the Friday after Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a lovely holiday season or holiday yesterday. I hope I don't know, it seems like it's a season. It starts yesterday and it keeps going. So, before we jump in, make sure that if you want to get coached, raise your hand. You can use the raise your hand button down here um, on uh, the bottom. It's on the bottom on mine. I'm sure many people it's on the bottoms. If you want to use that, go ahead and raise your hand. If you have questions, open the question and answer box and make sure that you put any of your questions in there. I want to welcome everybody here. I'm glad you found your way here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for um, being willing to, reach out and get the help. I think that so many people, especially in this season, they have all the reasons that they don't want to do that. So I love seeing the folks that are here that really want to get the help that they need. I did open this up, and I just posted, I just posted the link on Instagram. So I'm like, oh, I wonder who's going to show up to this party. So we'll see. So for those of you who are here, though, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you find your way here. I also want to cover the thought model. So, because that's usually whenever we're talking about coaching, that's almost always the thing that's running in the back of my head as a coach, as I'm coaching women to fix their type 2 diabetes. I am going to answer some questions that have been submitted ahead of time, but I will also apply the coaching model. So, if you've never heard me talk about the thought model and the coaching model, the thought model is it's a cognitive, I mean, I don't know, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's taught in psychological literature and social science is literature all over. I call it the thought model. It's called a lot of different things. The thought model consists of five parts. You have a circumstance, which we call the C line for circumstance. So there's the circumstance. There is the thought that we have as humans about circumstances. I like to think of this as our brain is a sensing organ. It's a prediction model. Like that's what it wants to do. It wants to take information from the environment that we're in and it wants to make predictions. It wants to fit that information into a mold that we understand. And we do that through our sensing organs. So that's whether those sensing organs are our eyes or our ears or our touch or our mouth, whatever it is, our brain has a prediction about that. That is a thought that we have. And then that thought gets directed, it gets transferred to our body in the form of a feeling. So we have a thought about the circumstances in the world that we have brought into our body via our sense organs. And then we have a feeling, and that gets transmitted to our body, right? The thought and the prediction gets transmitted to our body in the form of a feeling. Those feelings then drive our actions part, right? So we have circumstances, we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have actions. The feelings drive our actions. The actions that we do are driven by our feelings, and then those actions accumulate to give us the result that we have. So in the thought model, when we're using it to kind of break apart, or I don't know, break apart sounds a little aggressive, to kind of deconstruct what's happening in our brain, it's good to have a single circumstance. It's good to have a single thought. It's good to have a single feeling. But from that one feeling, we can have many different actions. Okay. So, an example of this is circumstance might be I ate tortilla chips at a Mexican restaurant, right? Like, that is something that like anybody else can look at. We had this experience in our brain where in our the circumstance that occurred where we saw tortilla chips and we put them in our mouth. That's also an action, of course. But in the moment when you're kind of trying to break apart what happened, why you ate the tortilla chips, it's a circumstance. So what your brain, your thought might give you about that thing that happened, that circumstance that happened is every time I eat tortilla chips, my blood sugars go up. Tortilla chips are the wrong thing to eat because I know my blood sugars go up. Tortilla chips are bad for me. All of these are different thoughts that you can have, and they may drive slightly different feelings. They may give, like, right, the thought happens in our brain. and transmits to our body in a feeling. Like each of these different may transmit slightly different feelings that give us different results. So an example might be tortilla chips in my mouth, right? Like that's a circumstance. Your thought might be, I know that when I eat these, my blood sugars go up. That feeling might be afraid or fear or worry. And from that feeling, maybe you like are not checking your blood sugars, and then you're not watching the rest of what you eat, and you're not stopping eating them because you're afraid, and you're just like, oh, this is the thing that I'm doing right now. I'm afraid that my blood sugars might go up, but I'm not doing anything more than just in this moment driving a certain action, right? Like the action is to continue to eat them because it feels safe in the moment, even though this thought is driving this fear, right? Um, Most of the time from that fear, though, what's going to happen is we're not checking. Like we don't follow up and see that we have a higher blood sugar. We also don't, again, there's like this, not the stop button. So maybe we eat 5 chips before we're like, oh, I shouldn't be eating these. I shouldn't have done that, right? That is one thought, or I know it's going to be high, right? That's the fear part that drives us to not check our blood sugar. But it could also be like, I know I shouldn't have done that. And then there's guilt, right? And from guilt, we hide from the thing that we're doing. So we typically continue to eat, right? And that's where you get kind of these layered actions that occur, right? But the overall result is, right, that these blood sugars end up being higher. Your blood sugars will end up being higher from the tortilla chips. That's just an off the cuff example. We can work through some others, but do understand that this is just the way the brain works. And this coaching model is always happening. Like for me as a coach, I'm watching this always happen. But for you as a human being, this is just the way the brain works. So recognize that that is going on all the time. So again, for those of you who have joined us, make sure that you um, pop any questions in the Q&A box. And if you want some coaching after Thanksgiving, and again, like guys, like I want to hear about your victories too, like where everything went well. Sherry, I know that you had some victories over the holidays. So I definitely like think that addressing those partly to celebrate the victory, but also partly to see what happened in that moment that gave you that success. And again, like what was my thought? What was the feeling? What was the action? The action is a success thing that you're going to say, I stuck to my plan. I ate these things. And then what is the result that came from that? I think that that's really important to see that. Um, so make sure you're popping those in the question and answer box because I want to definitely celebrate those. But if you have any questions about things that you ate, make sure you put that in the question and answer box. But I definitely will point out the thought model happening here. Some questions that were put out beforehand that like came to like people emailed me. One question was, what can I do about cheese? I know it's processed. Is there an alternative? So these questions are great, like they're fine, and I'm so appreciative for the questions, but do understand that there's an element of confusion that happens. So I always ask folks or I always point out to women that the food that you eat should pass through 2 filters, 2 questions. One, was this food available 10,000 years ago? If the answer is yes, it's probably fine. It's not going to usually, I can't think of any food that was available 10,000 years ago. Honey would be the one thing. Like honey was available 10,000 years ago and you probably can't eat it all the time, right? So 2 questions. One, was it available 10,000 years ago? The second question, if the answer is yes to that first question, it's probably okay, but you should definitely ask the second question if there's any further confusion, right? So carrots were available 10,000 years ago, but nobody's got, gosh, do carrots cause my diabetes? Is that right or wrong? You guys have heard me say this before. Nobody got diabetic because of their carrot problem. Nobody got diabetic because of their banana problem. Those are not the foods that cause type 2 diabetes. Period. End of sentence. And they were all available 10,000 years ago. Now, again, is honey, I always tell my clients, we can eat honey. Honey was available 10,000 years ago, but it's guarded by little stinging insects. So it's not meant to be eaten all the time. Okay. So then that's the second question, right? Like, is it something that's going to cause type 2 diabetes? If I eat this food all the time, is it going to cause type 2 diabetes? And if the answer to that question is yes, so does honey cause type 2 diabetes? Well, yeah, if I eat it all the time, it's probably going to be an issue. And if that's the case, then that's your answer. Yes, this causes my type 2 diabetes, so should I be eating it? Yes or no? When you're in the phase of reversing your type 2 diabetes, which is what the call next week will be on, and I believe that is on Wednesday morning next week. So we will be talking about kind of the process of reversing your type 2 diabetes. But it's not like you can't have honey forever. It's not like you can't have bananas forever, right? But recognizing that eating them too much is going to cause your blood sugars to be worse in that reversal phase. All right. So again, was it available 10,000 years ago is the first question. And if that answer is yes, then the next question is, does it cause my type 2 diabetes? If you ask yourself, was it available 10,000 years ago? Coffee was probably not available 10,000 years ago. And then the second question is, does it cause my type 2 diabetes? No, coffee is unlikely. And certainly, like, don't drink 3 pots a day. That's probably just not great for anybody. But coffee is not what's causing your type 2 diabetes. Okay. So that's the second question. And that kind of gives you some clarity about the issue. So, this question about cheese, is cheese okay? What do we do about cheese? I know it's processed. Is there an alternative? So, the first question was cheese available 10,000 years ago? The answer is unlikely. I mean, maybe it was. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I can't imagine how that was readily available or frequently available 10,000 years ago. So my answer to that question would be no, like it wasn't available 10,000 years ago. And then the second question is it causing my type 2 diabetes? Now, there is some mixed information here, and I am trying to get this clarified within the literature. So I'm doing my own research on this. Most of the time, I find for most people that type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance caused by overexposure to insulin. And that means that was cheese causing too much insulin to be released? Unlikely. Cheese has primarily fat and protein. There is a small amount of carbohydrate in the form of lactose. It's a sugar, but it's a very, I mean, like when you look at cheese as a whole, the ratio of fat to protein to carbs is nice. It's actually, it looks pretty good. It's primarily fat and protein, and there's a low amount of carbs associated with it. Most of the time, insulin resistance is caused by too many carbs, too high of carbs. And I don't even know that it's fair to say most of the time, but that is frequently where I see it, is there's too many carbs associated with it. We get too much insulin released and our cells kind of plug their ears and stop responding to the insulin. There is also a theory that within the cell, inside the cell, that there is blocking of the cellular like signaling. So the intracellular signaling. So insulin gets bound and it tells the cell to do something. There is some evidence that some of the fats that we eat might be blocking some of that cellular signaling. Okay. And again, I'm trying to get this delineated to how we handle that. So maybe cheese could be causing the issue. If you have to make a decision between a Pop Tart and cheese is always going to be the right answer, period, end of sentence. Okay, that's real simple. Um, and if you know that like you're eating cookies and you're eating cakes and you're eating breads and you're eating fries and you're eating pizza, and your brain's like, ooh, I don't know, is it the cheese or is it these things? I would bank that it's the other things, not the cheese. I would remove those other foods from your diet. And if you want to enjoy cheese, cheese is not the end of the world. So that's my take or my answer on cheese. And I realize that, like, oh, our brain, that I'm like starting this out with like, go to confusion, feeling confused when we're like, I don't know if cheese is the right answer. And we feel confused. And that makes us kind of have these actions of like wavering, like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna eat the cheese. I don't know what else to eat. So I guess I'll eat the Pop Tarts or whatever. And I realize that that's a pretty exaggerated example using the thought model. But I just want to point out that sometimes there is a deficit of knowledge, like, right? Like sometimes I have a deficit of knowledge right now. I'm feeling confused about whether to tell you cheese is okay because I haven't clearly got the information about this intracellular component. Okay. So there can be confusion. That's fine. But do understand that the knowledge, there is some basic knowledge within you. Okay. So again, if your brain's like, I don't know whether to eat celery or cheese, celery is probably the right answer. I don't know whether to eat Pop-Tarts or cheese, clearly cheese is the right answer. Okay. And that's where I want to promote the refusing of confusion. Okay. When it comes down to just those two basic questions, which one of these is the right answer? Which one of these were available 10,000 years ago? Which one of these caused my diabetes? It becomes really clear. Okay. Usually it becomes very clear. So, the next question that I received, can I use almond flour? So I'm going to offer you almond flour is just a way that we try to navigate keeping foods that are making us sick in our life. Okay. Sorry, I'm turning on my space heater here. Um, the foods that keep us sick are going to be things that are processed. Period. End of sentence. When we process food, I don't care whether we're processing flour or like wheat, or whether we're processing almonds, or whether we're processing macadamia, or whatever it is. Any food that we human beings process, we are constant 99% of foods that we process, we are concentrating the carbohydrate component. Okay. When we process and concentrate that carbohydrate component, it causes our bodies to have a huge surge of insulin release. Okay. That huge surge of insulin causes our cells to be insulin resistant and we don't respond to it. So whether it's almond flour or wheat flour, it does not matter. It's really like how many carbohydrates are in it. So when people ask if they can use almond flour, this is always going to be a processed food, like whether it's almond flour, coconut flour, it doesn't matter. Wheat flour, it's processing and it's concentrating the carbohydrate. And usually it's not going to be fabulous. Now, if you have insulin, or I'm sorry, if you have some kind of sensitivity to gluten, almond flour would be great. Like make almond flour muffins. That's awesome, but it's still a muffin. It's still bread. It's still processed. You're still going to have a huge surge of insulin, and it's probably not the best choice for reversing type 2 diabetes. So, those two questions, right? Was it available 10,000 years ago? No, almond flour was not available 10,000 years ago. I don't know. Maybe we would have thought about almond flour. But either way, um, does it cause like regular flour was probably available, right? Like we probably used, I don't know how long we've been eating bread, but it's been a long time, right? Like thousands of years we've been eating bread. So the question then becomes, was it available back then? Yes. The next question is, does it cause my diabetes? Absolutely. So there you go. If this is what's causing your diabetes, then you don't eat it. It's real simple. It's simple to understand what's causing your diabetes. Maybe it's harder to make that decision. And using the almond flour, like the whole question of can I use the almond flour is just a way that we are trying to keep this food in our life, even when we know it makes us sick. So all almond flour or coconut flour or macadamia nut flour, these alternate flours, it's all that it is. It's a way for us to try to keep that food in our life, even though it's making us sick. We're trying to work around the only way to the health that you're looking for is really to go through it. Like you're going to have to find a way to take these foods or to take control of eating these foods. I don't know that I don't feel like you have to bring them out of your life forever, but you're going to have to find a way to be in control of it versus trying to find a way that you keep it in your life without it making you sick. That becomes challenging. So, if you want to ask, the question is, can I use almond flour? And my answer to that question is no, I would not use almond flour or macadamia nut flour or any other coconut flour. I'm trying to think what else is out there. I wouldn't use any of those flours. Oat flour is another one. I would not use any of those flours. All of those are going to be high carb and probably stimulate insulin resistance. So if you're looking to normalize insulin resistance, I would not use those flours. Okay, somebody has a question. Is olive oil okay, or what should I use as a substitute? Olive oil has the best evidence for being healthy. It is hard to refute the health benefits of olive oil. Other oils, seed oils, have a lot of mixed evidence out there. I don't know if there's mixed evidence. They have a lot of negative press. I like to believe that used in moderation, maybe they're not the end of the world, but there are some that are because you can't use them in moderation. Corn oil is a prime example. Canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, those foods are in everything. They are in everything. So to use them in moderation is very, very difficult. So I would say those oils, corn oil, vegetable oil is corn oil. I know it's almost interesting. Somebody talked about it as a marketing strategy that the use of corn oil, calling it vegetable oil, because that's what they do. If you look at what vegetable oil actually is, it's like a, I think it's primarily corn oil, but it is definitely like not a great oil. But they call it vegetable oil because then we believe it's vegetable and it must be healthy. And it is not. It leads to a lot of our, like when we talk about that intracellular gumming up of the inside of that messaging from when the insulin binds at the door of the cell and then sends its message to the nucleus of the cell. They think that there's like there is evidence. It's not they think. I believe this actually happens. But insulin resistance can occur in that step, not just at the door as an opening step, which is what I frequently talk about. There can be, or there is, this other avenue where the messaging is not happening inside the cell. And they believe that these fats can gum that up. Okay. You've heard people talk about we should go to a plant based diet or a low fat diet to reverse our type 2 diabetes. As long as that low fat diet isn't low fat Twizzlers, because recognize Twizzlers are low fat. So we can't just go to eating low fat foods. We have to use, there's a combination of these two strategies that are, it's smart to implement. And I do think that some humans are more prone to that part happening inside the cell versus that part that happens at the door of the cell. And I think there is some variation there amongst human beings. And I think the more we learn about metabolic disease and metabolic health and metabolic healing and insulin resistance and high insulin levels, all of those are similar. Like all of those are probably have the same root cause, and that it's our diet. But how the human being manifests those, I think we're going to realize that maybe there's a number of different diseases that are maybe genetically predisposition for how humans do that, whether it's diabetes, whether it's polycystic ovarian syndrome, whether it's low testosterone, whether it's hypertension and dyslipidemia, cardiac disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. All of these diseases are caused by the same metabolic disease, which is too much insulin in our system. Seeing which of the humans manifest which disease, I think that may be a genetic predisposition that we will have more information about as we study this more. Um, so olive oil has the best evidence behind it. Corn oil and vegetable oil and canola oil have the worst. And then seed oils. So rapeseed, grapeseed, both of those are different oils. Sunflower seed, I would be very judicious in my use of that. Peanut oil is another thing. When you get roasted like almonds or roasted nuts, like they're roasted in something, it's almost always either vegetable oil or peanut oil. And again, just even too much of the sun burns, right? Like if we get too much sun, it burns us. Too much of these and constantly consuming these can be a problem. So I would steer clear of that. Olive oil has the best evidence behind it. If I were going to say that one thing was a yes, olive oil is usually that one thing. So olive oil is a great, I would not substitute anything for olive oil. I would substitute a lot of other oils with olive oil. Um, Coconut oil is a good one if you're making some kind of baked thing and you don't want to use the vegetable oil that's called for. The other thing that I do, because I think it's healthier, I'll just use butter whenever something calls for vegetable oil. So if I'm making my kids brownies, I do make my kids brownies, not a lot, but I do make them. When I do, I just melt 1 or 2 tablespoons, whatever it calls for, of butter instead of vegetable oil. I won't have vegetable oil in the house. It's really that the evidence behind vegetable oil is really that poor. Um, Next question that we have, what is the best fasting schedule, a 16 or 8? Fasting is an amazingly powerful tool for reversing your type 2 diabetes. It allows your cells, whether this is the inside of the cell getting gummed up, quote unquote, with whatever is happening inside the cell. That's where I have a hard time distinguishing with that intracellular component. I'm not sure what is causing that block in the cell, the signaling. So whether it's that or whether it's this part of the cell where you're getting the block of the insulin being released. If you're not trying to manage glucose all the time, it doesn't matter what's causing that. If you're not trying to manage the fuel of the cell, which is glucose, so everything gets broken down to that, whether it's a Pop Tart or a saltine cracker or a potato or a banana, right? It all gets broken down into this basic building block of glucose because that's what your cells burn. So no matter what you're eating, if you're not having like if no matter what you're eating, your cell is trying to burn that. So if you're not doing that, if you're not eating, if you're fasting, your cell is not trying to manage that fuel. Okay. So fasting, intermittent fasting is one of the most powerful ways to reverse your type 2 diabetes. So the question is 16:8. I kind of think 16:8 is a great place to start. Okay. I think that you try to work towards that. If you are not currently doing a fasting regimen, do not think you're going to jump from eating 14 hours a day and fasting 10 hours a day when you're like asleep in your sleeping hours. Don't think you're going to go from that current schedule to a 16:8, 16-hour fasting schedule instead of the 10-hour fasting schedule and an 8-hour eating window instead of a 14-hour eating window. You're not going to do that jump in a day. And if you do, you're going to be pretty uncomfortable and you're going to think I'm a total turd. So don't do that, please. Instead, I would start just squeezing it in. So if every morning you wake up at 6 a.m. and you're eating by 8 p.m. or 8 a.m., I'm sorry, and you're done eating by 10 p.m., start squeezing that in by an hour. So push off that 8 a.m. eating start to 9 a.m. and stop eating at 9 p.m. and do that for 4 days. And then squeeze it in another hour and squeeze it. So instead of 9, you push off till 8 or till 10 a.m. Instead of 9 p.m., you're pushing off till, or you're stopping eating at 8 p.m. And so that's a 10. So that now has you at a 10-hour eating window. That means you have a 14-hour fast. That means you have 14 hours where your cells are not having to manage glucose. They're getting a break. And then you squeeze back into an hour on each side more after 4 days, right? So instead of 10 a.m., you're squeezing down to 11 a.m., you start to eat. And instead of stopping eating at 8 p.m., you're squeezing that down to 7, okay, 7 p.m. So now you have an 8-hour eating window. Now you're getting closer to that 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating, okay? So that is, I say start there. I don't think there's any best fasting regimen. Really, you do a fasting regimen until you get the results that you like. There was a long time where I did like years, where I did a 22-hour fast every day in a 2-hour eating window. It just was convenient. It wasn't, like, did I reverse my insulin resistance? Yep. Did I lose weight? Uh-huh. I did all of those things. But it was just convenient to only have to worry about one meal, to only have to think about it one time a day, to only have to like clean dishes once a day. It was just convenient, although I had to clean dishes for my kids all the time. I also didn't have to worry then. I ate it at lunch and then I could make my kids whatever they wanted. Like there's all sorts of food that my kids eat that I would never eat. Like I just was never going to eat mac and cheese. That was never a big thing for me. Does it taste good? I guess maybe, but like I would not eat that. Chicken fingers, hot dogs. Like the meat makes me sick, so I can't eat that anyway. So it just became easy for me to then I didn't have to fight with my kids to eat, you know, zucchini noodles and pasta sauce or whatever it was that I was eating. I didn't have to argue with them at all about it. I made my meal. I made their dinner at home after school, and it was easy peasy. So for me, that was very easy, and I got great results. So what the best fasting schedule is really partly what works for you. Most women will find they start to get results on losing weight and reversing their insulin resistance with a fasting schedule somewhere of the 16:8, like narrower, that or narrower. So some women will go to an 18-hour fast and a 6-hour eating window. So that means maybe they start eating at noon and they're done by 6 p.m., or they start eating at 1 and they're done by 7 p.m., whatever that is. But some women find that they need to go to a little bit more. do understand that just because you stop eating at 7 p.m., it doesn't mean that the food has cleared your gut. It takes hours for the food to clear your gut. And then after that food clears your gut, then your insulin level is allowed to drop and you're allowed to give your cells some of that healing time. Okay. So don't think that just because you're not eating, that suddenly you're going to have like the benefit to your cells. It actually takes a number of hours after that. And that's why sometimes you do need to go to that longer fasting period so that you can give your body the time that it needs to clear all the food that was in your body. And then your cells can start to benefit from not having insulin floating around. So I hope that helps on that best fasting schedule. Unsalted roasted peanuts in the shell are no good. I would look at somebody just asked this question in the question and answer, and it's a follow-up question to the question about olive oil and fats. I would look at the bag. Some things are dry roasted and they're fine. They're fine. And again, in the end, like, are unsalted roasted peanuts what's causing your diabetes? Probably not. Probably not. And if you have to make the hard choice between a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or unsalted roasted peanuts, I would definitely say the unsalted roasted peanuts are the right answer, even if they're roasted in vegetable oil. I would say that's the right answer. But if you're ever wondering what your food is roasted in, and some places I'm sure you can find them roasted in other things. I know I make my own granola and I make it with whole nuts. So I'll use pecan, I'll use whatever I got in my fridge or in my cabinet, but I'll use pecans, I use pepitas sometimes. I really like those. I'll use sunflower seeds. I'll use almonds because I like those. I don't really love um cashews anymore. I used to love them. I used to live and die by them. They're just now a little too much, but I will use them. I buy all of the nuts raw, and then what I roast them in when I make the granola, and I do add like a little bit of oatmeal. I add oh, the little seeds. They're my favorite. Flax seeds are so good. I'll add a flax, a little chia. I mean, they're all good, healthy foods, but I roast them in butter. I just melt some butter and I mix it all together. When I'm making real granola, I'll add a teaspoon or two of honey to it also. Sometimes I'll put a little cinnamon in it. Sometimes I'll put a little touch of vanilla in it, whatever it is, depending on what flavor I want to it. But I just roast it in butter. And again, like, is butter the best fat? No, it does not have the great evidence that olive oil has in it. But if you get good organic butter from cows that are raised on food that cows are meant to eat, so that means grass-raised cows, then you're gonna, I mean, that butter is not the end of the world. And certainly the, 4 tablespoons that I use to make my granola or something is not going to be the end of the world. So, something to think about. Look at your bag, see what the nuts are roasted in. If you're interested in roasting your own, I think that that's fun. I don't know that I would try roasting it in olive oil, I guess. I don't know that it would be bad. I don't think olive oil goes nice with baked things that are meant to be sweet, but I guess it wouldn't be the end of the world if you're just trying to roast some nuts. So how you would do that is just take the raw, put a few like tablespoons of the oil, mix it in a bowl and, get it all mixed up and then put a little salt on it if you want. Some people like pepper on their roasted, whatever it is, peanuts or whatever. And then I put it on a plate on like a pan and parchment paper and I put it in the oven and it's really 10 to 20 minutes. You've got to keep an eye on it because the stuff goes Cajun, quote unquote Cajun, i.e. burnt very quickly. And so put it in the oven at like 375 to 385 for 10 to 20 minutes, keeping a close eye on it. I pull it out after 10 minutes and I flip it and see how close to being Cajun they are. And I put them back in. Guys, I am not a domestic goddess. I'm a domestic nightmare. I'm probably dangerous in a kitchen. So don't, like, if you've got better ideas about cooking, you probably ought to take your ideas because I don't know that I have great ideas, but this works. But yeah, you'll get them roasted that way. And I think they're so, so good. I think home roasting whether it be almonds or cashews or whatever, is far superior to buying them roasted in the store. So I hope that helps. Tiziana, I hope I got your name right. I hope that helps. So a couple of follow-up questions. Can you give practical example of calorie range in the 16 to 8 hour regimen? I don't follow calories. If you are looking to lose weight, there is no need to keep your calories at a certain level. In fact, that if you don't consume the calories, quote unquote, that your body, like your energy needs, if you're not consuming them, it forces your body to tap into your stored adipose, your stored energy, your stored calories. Calories are stored on the human's body in the form of fat. So I don't recommend doing any calories. Honestly, I don't even know how to make a recommendation in that. I would say that what you do want to do is you want to make sure that you're getting, most women need at least 100 grams of protein in a day, period, end of sentence. There is a weight-based calculation, and probably you really need somewhere between 100 and 150 grams of protein in a day. You probably will comfortably want to keep your carbohydrates somewhere between 50 and 100 grams of carbohydrates in a day. There is fat, like that's the other macronutrient that you want to keep in your life. And of course, all of these calculate out into calories. And I could do that calculation and figure out what it is, but I just don't think that that's as relevant as kind of knowing I need this many grams of protein. I need this many grams of you don't need any grams of carbohydrates, but then there is how many grams of fat do I need in my life? Um, I don't know what, I don't ever set people up. You need to make sure you're getting this many grams of fat. Most women fall out somewhere between 75 and 125 grams of fat in their day, each day. How much is saturated? How much is unsaturated? That's a whole different conversation. Um, Tiziana, let me know if that doesn't answer your question. I don't recommend any certain amount of calories. And again, if you are trying to lose weight, you definitely need to eat. Again, like you want to fuel your body, you want to give yourself the right amount of protein, the right amount of fat. Those are essential macronutrients that you need in your life. You cannot make all the protein that you need in your body. You cannot make all the fatty acids that you need in your body. You need to get those. And then, of course, carbohydrates carry your micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, your fiber, your phytochemicals, your polyphenols, all of on your carbohydrates. So when you're eating carbohydrates, you want to make sure they're loaded with high nutrients. Okay. So it really doesn't leave a lot of room for tortilla chips and breads and those kinds of things. So I don't know what comes out for calories in that. You want to make sure you're providing your body with all the macronutrients that it needs in a day, though. Terry has a question. Avocado oil is okay. Avocado oil. Avocados, as far as I know, I always say the more I know about things, the more I know I don't know everything, right? Like things change. My understanding of avocados is they really are a pretty potent, they are a highly packed, nutritious food. So they're high in carbohydrates and they're certainly high in calories because they're loaded with fat and carbohydrates. But they are good. They are loaded with all of the good things that human beings need. So avocado oil is another great one. And yes, cooking with it, I think is helpful. Roasting nuts with it, gosh, I don't know. Like certainly sauteing veggies though, I think oil would be amazing. So yeah, my understanding of avocado oil is fabulous. All right, other questions. Almond milk, okay. I think almond milk is okay. I would offer that I don't love, my daughter drinks not because I make her, and she just for some reason believes it's healthy, and I let her run with that. Um, the one thing I don't like about it is if you look at the ingredient list, it is a chemistry experiment. It's a lot of chemicals. I don't know what they are necessarily. Um, I don't prefer it because it has that. So, almond milk is okay. It's probably the same with coconut and all the other, you can get all oat milk, all of those things. It's probably okay. Do be aware all of those milks because human beings love sugar. We put sugar in all of these things. Okay. So when you're getting vanilla flavored almond milk, what you're really getting is sugared almond milk. When you're getting chocolate flavored almond milk, you don't need me to tell you you're getting sugar flavored almond milk. Like that's what it is. They put sugar, they put sweeteners in those. So that is the one caveat to almond milk. Outside of that, I think it's great for cooking with. I think it's great for doing a lot of things with. Even to get some of these, there are certain seeds and grains and things that have, although their oils may not be great. I don't know who's eating grape seeds or who's eating, I don't even know what rapeseed is. I don't know who's eating those things. But if you're thinking about like flax seeds have a lot of benefit to them, a lot of health benefits to them. There's polyphenols, there's all sorts of these micronutrients that you really cannot get. We can't manufacture them in a lab. Um, Certainly there's fiber. Uh, I'm trying to think of the phytochemicals, those sorts of things all come in on some of these seeds, and they're definitely have a lot of benefit and health benefits to them. So making those and like the overnight oats, doing a tablespoon or a teaspoon of oats. I want to offer, like, I think I used to take a very hard stand against oats, but if you're just having plain oats, they are not making you heart healthy. Don't believe what Quaker sells is trying to sell you, that they're making you heart healthy. That is not necessarily true. But steel cut oats has a lot of fiber in it, and there can be benefits to that. If you're having the discussion about whether you have steel cut oats or a muffin from a bakery, the steel cut oats are probably the right answer. But kind of bulking those up with things like flax seeds, things like seeds, these foods, they're they have a lot of micronutrients, minerals, vitamins, things in them that are very healthy. So using almond milk to do overnight things of those. So, a couple tablespoons of oats, a couple tablespoons of flax, a couple tablespoons of chia, and then some fruits, some berries mixed in with it. I think that is actually a really probably a high nutrient packed breakfast. So using almond milk for that, I think is helpful. I hope that answers that question about almond milk. If it doesn't, definitely put it into the question and answer box. And then Jennifer has a question. Are most basic seasonings okay? You got to look at the ingredient is really what it comes down to. So if you're talking about like as oregano, nobody got diabetic from an oregano problem. Like that is not the issue. Oregano, pepper, that's not an issue. I can come back to salt because there is some interesting connection with salt and kind of blood pressure and those kinds of things. Cinnamon, nobody got diabetic from cinnamon. And in fact, there's evidence that cinnamon is beneficial to glycemic control. So yeah, most basic, true basic seasonings are not a problem. Barbecue rubs, that we love sugar and we put it in everything. So a lot of times there's sugar in that. Um, Chili, same thing. Like there's lots of times sugar in the chili seasoning packets. Some of them don't. It's interesting. And like salsa, I love salsa. I love salsa. I like will use it as a dressing. I'll mix salsa with like sour cream and I use that as a dressing a lot of times on salads. I like salsa really with everything. I think it's heaven. In fact, I make a soup with salsa and I just put a jar of salsa in it. I have been shocked. I'm not saying that Tostitos is they're like committed to healthy, clean food. I'm not saying that at all, but their salsa is one of the cleanest salsas I've found. Same thing with some of the taco seasonings. I've had to get the off-brand taco seasoning because it doesn't have sugar in it. Like that's the one that I could find without sugar in it. I don't know. I don't know if it kind of makes sense. The things that are very successful and making a lot of money that then gets charged more for, they get successful because they have human beings like us who love sugar and they put sugar in all the things because we like it and then we buy it. Um, so some of those packeted seasonings have a lot of sugar. I don't know that I would even say a lot, but they definitely have sugar in them. So they tend to have more carbs than ones without it would. So I actually look up my own and I'll just do like, pepper, what is it, chili powder, some black pepper. I just do my own. Chili is the big one that I found that seasonings have to go into. I do, my mother used to always make chicken with salt and pepper and oregano, and I like it like that. So I will sprinkle oregano on my food pretty frequently, or on my chicken at least. I like it that way. I use curry in some of my chicken salad recipes, so I'll use that. Yeah, most of the basic seasonings, the true basic seasonings, are not going to be an issue. It's when you get the packaged stuff from the store that you have to watch. They add sugar to all the things. Salt. So, everybody gets, and I don't know that this is anybody's specific question, but I do try to, once we get more information about the science of some of our nutrients, try to correct what has been put out there in the media and just I mean, just this is years of information that we have always thought. We've always been told to avoid salt for blood pressure control. We have always been told high salt diets create high blood pressure. And that we're finding more and more evidence that that is not the case. That is not the case at all. High blood pressure or the kidneys, let's take it back. The kidneys manage your water filtration, like how much water you keep in your body. And also, the kidneys manage your electrolytes, your potassium, your sodium, magnesium, those kinds of things are managed within the kidneys. What we have realized is that insulin affects the kidneys in a couple different ways. If you have too little insulin, you're wasting all of the water and you're wasting all of your sodium. Really is what happens is you get rid of your sodium when you have too little insulin. Like when your insulin levels are really low, you're putting out all the sodium. So some people who are doing like ketogenic diets tend to have the risk of having these electrolyte abnormalities and they have to take electrolyte supplements. And the reason that they have to take these is because you're putting out the insulin causes your body to stop retaining that sodium. On the flip side, if you are insulin resistant, if you have high insulin levels, you have hyperinsulinemia, your insulin levels are very high, and it does the opposite to your kidneys. It causes your kidneys to retain sodium and in turn retain water. And that higher amount of water in your vascular system puts pressure on the vessels and causes high blood pressure. And it does not matter how low of a sodium diet that you have, you will retain that water and that sodium and have high blood pressure no matter. So, there was a few years ago, they put out reports that this whole idea of less than 3 grams or less than 2 grams of sodium was very arbitrary. Like it was put out many years ago and it was an arbitrary number. There was no evidence behind it. And there was no, like, there's no rationale behind it. It was just like, oh, we're going to pick this number because we see that there's a connection between sodium and hypertension. And they're not wrong. There is a connection between sodium and hypertension. The missing link, though, is that insulin resistance is causing your kidneys to hold on to the sodium and therefore the water, and that's driving the hypertension. It's not the amount of sodium that you're eating in your diet. It is this effect of the insulin resistance on your kidneys. And in fact, there was a study many years, I don't know, probably, I don't know, 12 years ago, maybe. I'm taking a random guess at that. But they labeled salt on the table, like table salt that people would use, and they, enrolled however many families and labeled table salt so that we could see it. There was a reagent that we could put in the urine and that we could see how much salt ended up in their urine. Like, is this where their salt is coming from? And what we realized is in that study is the amount of salt they used on the table actually had nothing to do with the amount of salt that was in their body, right? What they realized was this processed food was actually where the salt was coming from. And they had multiple different arms of this study to see kind of where people were getting their salt. Is it from the processed food or from table salt? What they realized is people were getting salt from the processed food, not from the table salt. That was not a major additive to the amount of dietary salt that they were having in their body. And of course, the interesting component is that in addition to the processed foods having salt, it's also having things that drive up your insulin, leading to insulin resistance. This processed food, I have really come to the conclusion that it is truly causing the disease. It's not like there's any amount of it that's okay. It is actively causing disease in our body, period, end of sentence. And so it kind of makes sense that that's actually what's driving hypertension is this processed food. And now there's evidence out there showing this link is really this hyperinsulinemia. So recognizing that, I always let ladies when they sign with me, when they like join the group, I'm like, yeah, your hypertension and your cholesterol, in addition to your blood sugars, are all going to be, improved significantly from learning how to, let go of this food that's making you sick. I heard a really interesting quote, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to. I heard it from a scientist her last name is Barrett. It's actually hyphenated, but it's Barrett. And she works with emotions. Like she's a scientist who studies humans and how we manage emotions. But she mentioned a book, and I'm looking forward to reading. It's not one of hers, it's somebody else's book, but it talks about how it's not all nature, is the name of the book, I believe. It's We're Not All Nature. And the quote that was like just moving that I heard from her this morning was, we are beings that have nature that needs to be nurtured. Like our nature in the human being is the kind of nature that needs to be nurtured. And so, yes, maybe we always have like genetic predispositions. People will ask me all the time, like, do you like diabetes runs in my family? And I'm like, diabetes doesn't run in our families. Our love for the food that creates diabetes, that's what we learn from our family, right? This idea that nature drives us to be sick is the most unfortunate thing that medicine has put out into the world because it takes all the power away from the human to change their health. Whereas if we stop eating these foods that make us sick, do I still have a disease present? And if the answer is no, that is a behavioral thing. That is not a genetic thing. And that's really what I help women do is one, create evidence that this is not the case, right? Create evidence that I can change the way I eat and see significant improvement in my blood sugars. If you haven't already downloaded the 14 days to better blood sugars, please do so. You can get to it in my link tree. So if you're on Instagram and follow me on Instagram, and if you're not, go find me on Instagram. There is a link tree in my bio, and it has all the places that you can get help with me. And one of the things there is the 14 days to better blood sugars. I highly recommend you go and download it. It is a 14-day food menu. If you do that for 14 days, you will see improvement in your blood sugars. If you do not, please reach out to me and let me know because there's something else. One, I want to hear about it. Oh, what else do we need to do? But for my experience, for 90% of people, if they do these changes, they will definitely see improved blood sugars. So go find that guide. I think I put it out partly because everybody asks me for a guide, and I hate to give a guide on food. Like you'll see things and you'll be like, I don't want to eat that. I know you don't want to eat that. I get that. But the second part about, people are asking for it was the first part that I put it out. But the second part is if you truly believe that your blood sugars, no matter what you eat, your blood sugars aren't going to get better, please go find that guide because part of what that guide is there to do is to give you proof of something different. If you change your way you are eating to this, you can see improved blood sugars. And what I always offer people is there's what you're doing over here and that 14-day guide, and then there's a gray zone between that space. You may not want to live over here in that 14-day guide for the rest of your life, but you also don't want to live in the land of diabetes and being sick. Let's find where you need to be in that gray space between. That's what I help women do. All right, unless there's any other questions, we are coming to the top of the hour. I think I've answered all the questions I'm going through here. Or I guess we're coming to the bottom of the hour, but we're coming to 60 minutes. We're a few minutes off, but if anybody does have any questions, make sure you reach out to me. There will be one more webinar in the November webinar series, and it is going to cover kind of the process that I teach women to fix their type 2 diabetes. Join us for that. I hope there are some new things that you're not aware of. But do understand, I'm not going to give you, you already know 90% of what you need to do. You need to not eat processed foods. You are trying to find a way to keep in your life, even though you know that they make you sick. Those are the foods that you probably are going to need to be willing to let go of in order to reverse your type 2 diabetes. That is what I will help you with coaching. Again, that circumstance, the things that we believe about Twinkies. Twinkies are circumstances in the world. Everybody can look and see there's a Twinkie. We bring that into our brain via our eyeballs, and our brain says, oh my God, they taste so good. That's my favorite. Or your brain says, oh my God, I hate that I can't live without those because they make me sick. Like I hate that I can't have them because they make me sick. These are the stories that your brain is bringing in. These are the predictions that your brain brings in. And either like the, oh my God, I love Twinkies, is either creating desire. And from that desire, you're eating these foods. And that is creating the result of one, that you always will love Twinkies because that is just the way your body, the human's body is made to crave some of these foods, to desire these foods. It is a hardwired part of our brain. Or if you're having the thought that, oh my God, life is going to suck because I can't eat those, and you're feeling like miserable or angry or frustrated or cheated or deprived, right? Because you can't eat those foods. And from that action, you sulk around, or from that feeling, you sulk around and you're looking at the food and you're constantly creating evidence about why it sucks. They can eat it, but I can't. I used to be able to eat it, but now I can't. Why did this have to happen to me? If that's what you're creating the result that this is miserable, that I can't eat that food, even though it makes me sick. Okay. That's all optional, guys. All of it is optional. Okay. On some level, you will always desire the food. Like that's just a hardwiring of our brain. I look at sweet food. Last night, I looked at a second piece of apple pie. There was a banana cream pie I didn't even know about. I could smell it. It like infiltrated the dessert room, right? I was like, oh my God, that smells so good. My daughter had like chocolate peanut clusters. I didn't know those were going to be there, so I hadn't put those on my plan. And she was like, "You want one?" I was like, "Those are pretty good, sister. You're not, those are delicious." I didn't have them. There's never going to be a time where your brain's not like that food's going to taste good. Okay. That is just part of the way your brain is wired. It is possible to not be compelled by those thoughts every time you have them, though. And that's what I help women. Sherry, Tiziana, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You guys are both welcome. Is there a way to watch the second week of this series? They should all be on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to type this here for you, Patty. Um, if it is not, please let me know. I'm going to see if I can find it. I'm also going to check the YouTube channel, make sure there's no questions there because people can watch in there. They should be all on the YouTube channel. I'm going to see if I can find that link for you, Patty, before we sign off. And I hope it doesn't start screaming at us, although I think I have it all muted. The November 8th, it may have been probably the 12th. I may not have it uploaded. So there should be one from the 15th. I will double check and make sure that it is uploaded. You know what? It is titled, there are two that are titled the November 8th. They are different. I will retitle the second one it's from 9 days ago. So I know that that's the one that you're looking for. But it is on the YouTube channel. I'm going to pull up the link for it and then put it in the question and answer to your question, Patty. So, all right. That should get you there, Patty. I hope so. All right. You guys are so welcome. I hope you guys have a great holiday weekend. I love this holiday. I love this part of the year in general, but I hope everybody has a great holiday weekend and enjoys your family and gets some time to have a good amount of gratitude for everything in your life, because I think if we look, we will find that that's there. So everybody have a great weekend. I will be back next week and I'll